Welcome to the Leader's Edge podcast. I'm Sandy Laycox, Editor-in-Chief of Leader's Edge. In this episode of our Politics and Risk series, Council VP of Government and Political Affairs Blaire Bartlett and Council Member Charlie Daniels, Senior Vice President at broker NFP, interview Representative Marc Molinaro of New York. Then we hear from Blaire and Joel Copperrood on the latest from Capitol Hill. I hope you enjoy it.
Charlie, thank you for joining me today. And for those that listen, I'm here with Charlie Daniels. He's the Senior Vice President of NFP, and he is, I guess your home base is upstate New York. You're also a former chair of CIAB back in 2005. And today we have a podcast with a conversation with you and Congressman Marc Molinaro, who represents the 19th District of New York. He's a freshman member. He's on House Agriculture, Transportation, and Infrastructure. But you know him before he came to Congress. And so how do you know Marc Molinaro?
So Marc first came put on my radar screen when I found out during the elections for mayors in Dutchess County back in, I think it must have been in the 90s. It's almost 35 years ago. Marc was 18 years old and ran for the mayor of a little village in Dutchess County, and he won. And at the time was the youngest mayor in the United States. He then became a New York State Assemblyman, then became our county executive, and he was our county executive, and frankly, one of the most effective county executives in our history. At the time, I was chairing the Dutchess County Industrial Development Agency, and Marc had established a program called Think Dutchess Business Alliance, which aligned businesses with the public sector to create and retain jobs. And Marc's Think Differently program did something similar with not-for-profit agencies in the public sector. And he thinks outside the box. You can't put him in a political box.
I love when we are able to connect our members with members of Congress. And that's part of the reason we do this podcast, and to show that bipartisanship does exist, and that we do rely on the relationships that our members have with members of Congress, and how we're able to even augment that relationship is very helpful. And so let's get started. And I hope that everyone, enjoys hearing about bipartisanship, because it does exist. And hopefully you'll hear that it's strong, even if you may not hear about it.
The amount of success that you had in Dutchess County was really unparalleled, and kind of want to talk to you about that today, and talk about how you were able to forge consensus between all these different constituencies, whether it be the Democrats, the Republicans, the business, the not-for-profit sector. I was hoping you would share what inspired you to start that, and then how are you using that to springboard some initiatives on the national level.
Obviously the last few weeks have been distressing for a lot of people, myself included. Charlie, you know this. I spend every day of my adult life actually governing, and it's kind of funny to say. I mean, I usually say, well, I spend every day of my adult life in public service, because I was elected to office as an 18-year-old, and I've been doing this for a while. But more than public service, I've actually governed, and so the last few weeks have been really distressing because we got away from that, and hopefully, we now can move in that direction. I appreciate you mentioning Think Differently. In Dutchess, we launched what is now a nationally recognized effort to support those with intellectual, physical, and developmental disabilities, and really break down barriers and create opportunities. And I've talked about this a lot, and Charlie, you know this, one, from my personal experience. I have a daughter who lives on the autism spectrum, was born with a seizure disorder, and lives life with some developmental disabilities. And so the reality of providing support as a parent is just sometimes overwhelming. The entire system, is a labyrinth. And layers of government have just created more complication for folks who are trying to advocate for themselves or for some loved one with a disability. And frankly, if you got a full-time job, it's almost impossible to do. And so I wanted my county government to be more responsive to and respectful of those with disabilities and their families. And that effort became, broad-based, from employment to education, from parks and playgrounds to traditional ADA accessibility, to housing and transportation. And so now in Congress, it's something that I've made sort of my signature, priority. There are a lot of things that we have to deal with, and obviously, but a lot of priorities that the people who have elected me asked me to focus on, and rightfully so. We're focused on them. But this is a population that often gets ignored. 80% of those with disabilities are unemployed when they really have an opportunity to contribute in a lot of ways. And so here I'm trying to create those opportunities. Everything from, by the way, partnering with a few Democrats on language, making sure that the words we use in criminal court and process reflect not the old language of how we used to talk about those with disabilities, to emergency response, making sure FEMA addresses those with disabilities, whether it's hurricane, fire, floods, or any kind of emergency, and all points in between. And so it's a priority for me, and it's something that we're gonna remain active and effective in addressing.
What's been your strategy in terms of reaching across the aisle to gain support from the colleagues on the left?
Yeah. And so I say this: I'll work with anybody who's honest and earnest about solving a problem. And I think you know this. I first ran for office as an 18-year-old in a place where you don't run on party affiliation. And frankly, as we used to say, when the roof leaks, it leaks on Republicans and Democrats, and the job of government is to simply fix the roof. Here in Washington, we spend a lot of time blaming somebody for why the roof leaks, whether or not we've picked the right contractor to fix the roof, and how much we're going to pay to fix the roof, and whether we're going to pay at all. And so, I think that Washington could use a lesson from a village mayor. The job is just to get the job done. And so for me, as I said, I'll work with anybody who honestly and earnestly wants to solve a problem. And, a lot of times, by the way, that means I'm working even within my own conference, within the Republican majority, to try to get some agreement. I will say my lifetime of experience, I think, has been of help. I don't come to Congress with a deep understanding of parliamentary procedure here, but I certainly have a great deal of experience in how government's supposed to function. And I know the layers from federal, state to local, having now served in and worked in all of them. And I also understand the nexus between, what small businesses like yours, or farms like the ones I represent, or community and local leaders. I know the nexus between the challenges they face and whether it's state, local, or federal government. And so I think that, approach and background is helpful. I subscribe to the Harry S. Truman model, which was to speak less and listen more early in my term. When I have a concept, to try to be respectful of the fact that there are a lot of people who've been here for a long time, some brand new, all have life experiences, all were sent here by their constituents, all believe that they're speaking on behalf of their constituents, and therefore, my beliefs are not more important than somebody else's. It's just a matter of molding the consensus. I'll wrap up by specifically saying, one of the surprises and challenges in Washington is that there really aren't a lot of places where Republicans and Democrats get to sit and talk together. So you have to purposefully make those opportunities, and I do. If you turn on C-SPAN because you're up late at night or have nothing better to do in life, you can kind of see members wandering around, and it is a little bit like the middle school cafeteria. It's likely the most powerful middle school cafeteria in the world, but you've got to figure out which lunch table you want to sit at and for how long. And I am, just like when I was in middle school, don't spend a lot of time at any one lunch table. And so you might turn it on, and I might be across the aisle talking to folks. I might be on the aisle talking to folks, which is interesting. Our most conservative members sit right on the aisle. And then I use those opportunities outside of that time to build relationships as well. And then lastly, I think, Charlie, you'll appreciate this probably more than Blaire or anyone else. I lived through many members of Congress, from Hamilton Fish and Jerry Solomon through Kirsten Gillibrand, John Sweeney, and Chris Gibson. And so the models, for me at least, are people who are purposeful in their service And so we assembled a team of people, our legislative staff, our communication staff, and the leadership both in the district and here. I've said to them, our job is to govern. And so I want them working with other staff from those offices, building the relationships necessary to actually legislate. And I'm very proud to say, with nearly every one of our policy initiatives being bipartisan, no freshman member has more policy initiatives added to legislation adopted by the House than I do. And I believe I have the second most of any member of Congress. And again, everything from modest to sized initiatives to very small steps meant to address the priorities of the people I serve.
Well, speaking of legislation, and that is impressive. I did not know that, Mark. One of the things that we're interested in as an insurance trade organization is the Farm Bill.
Yeah, rightfully so.
And authorization of crop insurance. So, where does that stand? I mean, how did you balance the needs of your constituents with the needs of the nation? I mean, what was the process that you went through? Because we're interested in that for our members.
Sure. And so I'll say, first of all, crop insurance isn't the priority of upstate farmers. It is a priority, but it isn't the priority. And I say that because for my mindset, right, I go into the district and folks are talking about specialty crops or dairy margins, and all very, very important. But when you talk to farmers in upstate New York, they acknowledge the supply chain issues and the reliance on those that do more readily and more appropriately have to rely on crop insurance. And so I try to sell the network, right? I try to explain that this is an issue that affects the entire supply chain. And so I try to explain and really argue the supply chain, the entirety of our agricultural industry and infrastructure, and why crop insurance is critically important to that network, if you will, to that supply. And so what I will tell you is, let me give you a status report. Had we not been forced into ousting the speaker, and again, I'll just say, I'll give my one partisan comment, which is 8 Republicans and every Democrat voted to eliminate and oust the Speaker of the House. Not something that Congress has ever done before, nor should we ever repeat, and frankly was a huge mistake. But it also stole a month of time, maybe more. And had that not occurred, I believe the Ag Committee would have the Farm Bill out of committee, would have had it out of committee late October, if not this week. And we'd be moving immediately to next month into floor time. Now, the Speaker, Mike Johnson, has assured us that the Farm Bill is a priority. Right now, we think we may still get floor time before the end of the year for Farm Bill, but there is an honest conversation about whether or not we want to consider a short-term extension as we kind of negotiate out. And so I just would tell you, for me, the Farm Bill is more than only agriculture policy, although for the first time in our lifetime, well, actually, Charlie, for the first time in all of our lifetimes, even yours, America is producing less than we consume. And that's a problem. And if you study civilizations throughout history, if you can't feed yourself, you're really not in a good position. And America is now reliant on foreign countries, and worse yet, those countries, or at least their influence, is buying farmland and farm assets in America, and that's problematic. And so we've got to get the Farm Bill adopted. Chairman Thompson's made it a bipartisan effort. We are working in a bipartisan way. There are lots of agreements from that we have to, and issues we've got to cross, from nutrition and the traditional food stamp issue, which I'm happy to mention and talk about, but to more traditional farm policy. For me, we're focused on dairy resilience and trying to open markets for dairy, protect dairy as an industry, and expand the protection of dairy farming. Supply chain resiliency, critically important. And then I'll return back to where I started, creating job opportunities and openings in the field of agriculture for everybody of every ability. And so I do have a policy priority to expand AgriAbility, which is a national program to support families with individuals with disabilities. My goal is to expand it to open up job opportunities in the agricultural industry for those of every ability.
That's a great initiative, Mark. I happen to do business with a lot of human service agencies, some of which have an ag program, and it's been wonderful.
It's also an education opportunity for those in particular. I would say, as I said about those with disabilities, 80% unemployed. They also have very limited access to educational opportunities beyond high school. If we can move those with disabilities with interest into Future Farmers of America or Cornell programming early on, they can transition into secondary education, if you will, through agriculture, and it really would create both educational and employment opportunities.
Mark, I think I have one final question. Blaire may have another, but we're a bipartisan trade organization, so we're very interested in members like yourself who are interested in reaching across the aisle to move legislation forward. Are there any particular members on the other side of the aisle that you feel you're having good luck working with, or in the future may end up? Because we'd like to know that.
Yeah, and so the short answer is, as you could expect, Congressman Pat Ryan and I worked very closely together. He was Ulster County executive. I was Dutchess County executive. We only had the Hudson River dividing us. And during his tenure, which was basically several months and then 2 years of COVID response, partisanship and politics didn't get in the way. You likely know in August of last year, he and I ran against each other, and I have every reason to not work with him. But I don't subscribe to that kind of philosophy. And so we work together on a number of issues. We have our disagreements, as most people do, but we work together on a number of policy initiatives. I point to Josh Gottheimer in New Jersey, another partner that we work together on policy initiatives as well. There's a few newer members that I work with on accessibility issues, but I point to Josh and Pat as sort of the ones that we go to first to kind of feel out, if there's going to be the ability to work together. But I will say again, I want to return to, you got to be purposeful in making those relationships. The Washington, D.C. delegate and I, Eleanor Holmes Norton, you would not necessarily put us in the same room or even on the same legislation for any particular reason. But we co-sponsor a bill to change language here in the District of Columbia to eliminate the R slur that still exists in court proceedings and court language here in Washington, and replace it with language that's more like moderate developmental or moderate intellectual disabilities. So, on any given day, it's a good idea. I'll work with somebody to get it done.
Blaire, is anything else you'd like to cover?
What's the number one concern you hear from constituents? When you're stopped with your family at the grocery store, at the gas station, what do you hear the most?
So first, I want to say I am at the grocery store. I don't judge anyone else. Charlie knows this. Blaire, you and I have talked about it. I'm sure. I have 4 children. You will see me at the grocery store or Sam's Club with a lot of stuff. And the stuff is very expensive. And that's what I hear and the people I represent obviously are most concerned about. Everything from property taxes to gas to groceries to electric costs, just too damn high. And I hear it from everyone, regardless of means, regardless of background, regardless of ideology. It's just very expensive. It is also what fuels upstate New York's exodus, in that we still, New York State and upstate lead the nation in out-migration, more people leaving New York to other states than any other state in America, except I think Alaska. In the case of Alaska, it's likely the weather. But in the case of us, it's cost of living. And so that's number one. I just put the second one, though, is and I just want to point to it, is connected. And that's a lack of respect they feel from their government. Not necessarily the individuals who serve in it. I suppose they, it's like everything else. They might dislike Congress, but they may like their Congress member. They may hate the state legislature, but they may like their legislator. They just feel like government, in particular, Washington and Albany, aren't paying attention to them and aren't giving them the respect they deserve. And the regrets I have as a public official, and I still have them today, is when I inadvertently make people feel like their voice isn't as important as it is. And so I dare say I don't let that happen much, but when it does, that's when I regret it, because I just represent a part of the state that knows what it's like to be disrespected by government, and I never want that to happen.
Well, Marc, thank you so much. Thank you for what you did for Dutchess and what you're doing for our districts. And I think you're going to be very, very successful. We're going to hear much more from you, I think, as years go by. So
I'm in the place that I think I can be most useful, and I am, despite the dysfunction and at times distressing situation. I do love it. I was told by a colleague of mine, stop saying you love being a member of Congress. Nobody loves being here. And I do. I love it for its responsibility, and I love it for the opportunities.
Blaire, that was a great conversation with the Congressman. Really interesting around bipartisanship and his history of service. Without further ado, let's go right into our current government affairs issues. I know you all have a ton going on this week, so let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I really loved that conversation. I really liked, all of them. They talk about, all of the members that we've interviewed talk about their bipartisan creds, but I mean, his are second to none. He's great. He works across the aisle regularly, as he mentioned. I know a lot of members on the other side of the aisle like to work with him. I had to smile when I heard his take on the ousting of Kevin McCarthy and how he thought that was a partisan statement to blame the Democrats for his ousting. It's funny, right after that, actually around the same time that was recorded, I spent a good chunk of time at a retreat for a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group of the most moderate Democrats and the most moderate Republicans. And it's formed so that the moderates can talk to each other on a regular basis because they have so much more in common than potentially other members of their caucuses collectively. And there was so much frustration with the other side of the aisle on both sides. And Republicans blamed Democrats very aggressively for siding with Matt Gaetz and taking down Kevin McCarthy. It was a very tense weekend. And my message to all of them was, you've got to move on. If the moderates can't talk to each other, this whole democratic experience is just done. Like, we are in such a fragile state right now where business issues are not getting done because moderates can't get along, and you guys just have to move forward. So I smiled when he made that comment because I heard those sentiments echoed very loudly at that retreat. But I'm very confident in his background, his dedication to governing, to moving things forward. I think that is consistent with most people that are part of that group. And honestly, like the broad center, which is what is largely represented in both sides of the aisle, they just want to move forward. They're being, they got the gun held to their head from the left and the right to try to move further to the fringe, and they really just want to do the right thing. So I'm confident we're going to see our way through this, but I thought his comments were really relevant, and they made me feel good moving forward. But all of that said, our big issue right now, as everyone listening knows, is our PBM bill. And it sounds, both sides of the aisle, both chambers have largely coalesced around some form of PBM reform legislation. And we have our parochial language in both bills, which would require PBMs to be as transparent with their revenue streams as brokers are. We actually think that this is current law, but PBMs have made the case that the language is ambiguous and they don't have to comply with it. So we are seeking clarity that they do have to comply with it. And if we can get the House bill or the Senate bill past the other chamber and to the president's desk, we will claim a big victory. And it's been held up by the chaos in the House, as every piece of legislation has. But since they have sorted that through, assuming we can get through the potential government shutdown on Friday, it looks like our next bite at the apple on getting this to the president's desk will be early next year. And I'm cautiously optimistic about that strategy. Blaire, what are your thoughts?
I was trying to be nice and not interrupt you, but I should have interrupted you when you said that, Republicans and Democrats, they need to move on. I will remember this day because, constantly January 6th is brought up as something that prevents Republicans and Democrats from working together. And so, I agree with you, Joel, that, folks need to move on. And you see that, someone like Marc Molinaro, who has been in public service since he was 18, the nation's youngest mayor when he was elected, has been successful because he's willing to work with anyone who wants to solve problems in an earnest way. And I wish that was highlighted more, because those, as we have shown through this podcast, those members of Congress do exist. And it's just unfortunate that they're not deemed newsworthy enough. They're not deemed clickable enough. And so it's just really frustrating. And while I'm glad, why I'm really glad that you had the idea for this podcast. But moving on to, the schedule this week, and speaking with a member of Congress last week who's really close to the PBM fight, he said he thinks that it could, their PBM legislation could still happen this year. I was surprised at that comment. He said, no, really, I think it could happen. So I'm still holding out hope that some PBM bills will go. But unfortunately, we know that when things tend to move quickly like this, right before the end of the year, it doesn't always work out how we planned. And things tend to get removed or added very quickly that you don't know about until the bill's passed. And so I'm just, I know that we're doing all that we can to make sure that doesn't happen to our language. But that's always frustrating about this time of year, that you have the holidays and you have, the potential of nonsensical legislation happening. But this is the first test for Speaker Johnson. So we'll see how it goes.
And to his credit, like you just said, how this end of the year chaos is always frustrating, because language is always inserted that is never fully vetted and thought through, and you got to sort through it on the tail end and usually fix it. Speaker Johnson has dedicated himself not to going down that road and not passing a large omnibus bill so everyone can just go home for the holidays. He has made it clear he wants whatever comes out of the House not to be rushed, but to be thoughtfully vetted. Which I feel like is a consistent theme when you hear anyone who takes over the leadership reins. They all promise to go through regular order, and they promise to pay for everything, and they make all the promises, and that seems like the process ends up owning them more than vice versa. But it is a refreshing goal to hear.
So I just want to say to our listeners that it's a little bit alarming when Joel and Blaire start talking about how the problem solvers are not getting along, because they're like my last hope always. And you guys, they always make me feel okay when they come and talk to our folks. So this is very alarming to me. Even the problem solvers can't do it anymore.
It's frustrating.
And I think it also has something I think this is the 9th week or 10th week. This might start the 10th week, or it starts the 9th week. Like, I think, mental capacity is frayed. Tempers are short right now. This is the longest that Congress has been in session. And so it's showing. And so I know that they are also looking forward to not being around each other for a while.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It's always great to hear what's going on, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that they can keep it together for a little bit longer.
Great.
Thanks, Sandy.
Thanks, Sandy.
That was the Council's Government Affairs team, along with Charlie Daniels of NFP and Representative Marc Molinaro. For more politics and risk, visit leadersedge.com or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or SoundCloud.